What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, October 4th, 2018. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. It's a very, very busy news day. A lot of stuff going on all over. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and observations. So let's get right on into it. It looks like this Kavanaugh carnival may be drawing to a close. The FBI, as you know, delivered the report on this last investigation into Kavanaugh. Apparently, they went on out and talked to 10 people who were supposed to be corroborating the accusations, and they came up with absolutely nothing. The White House is now expressing their confidence that Kavanaugh will be confirmed, but of course the fight is going to go on to get Republicans to desert or to get Democrats to desert. So we're coming up here on a vote for a motion of cloture, which means, yes, the hearings are coming to an end, and it's time to move forward. And it's being considered almost a test vote on how people are going to vote on this situation. But it's a fight. I mean, I was watching the video of the protesters out in front of the Senate building, and oh my goodness, it's hysteria out there, and it's wild. It's almost as crazy as it was back in the 1960s. So anyway, Mitch McConnell filed cloture to end the debate. And there are two reports as to when the confirmation vote will occur. And according to the Gateway Pundit, it's going to be on Saturday. But according to the Political Insider, it will be tomorrow. And the Democrats are still out there screaming and crying, oh, the investigation wasn't thorough enough. In fact, some of the Democratic senators are out there saying there's obviously been a horrendous cover-up here, and harump. And boy, I mean, talk about the pot calling the kettle black. You know, can we go back and talk about Uranium One? Or how the Democrats stole the nomination from Bernie Sanders in 2016? So the Democrats are thrashing about. They're still trying to find some way they can derail this. And I have a comment here. In fact, it's probably a friendly warning because nobody is above assassination, not even Supreme Court justices. And there are still very bizarre questions about how Justice Scalia passed away. So if Kavanaugh is confirmed, he is going to have to really look to his personal security, because I would not be surprised if taking him out was seen as the Democrats' last final solution to prevent the Supreme Court from going conservative. Anyway, I still think the Democrats are going to try a filibuster and just drag it out and drag it out and drag it out. And it's not like they're going to be able to stall this thing until after the election. That's 5 weeks away, let alone the seating of the new Congress, which is all the way over in January here. But a lot of people are starting to realize this whole sexual assault circus has fallen apart. And Rachel Mitchell, who was that sex crimes prosecutor, is basically saying the reason that Christine Ford's story lacked credibility was that everything that she said changes at her convenience. And Mitchell was saying there are many reasons victims delay reporting sexual abuse, and that victims may legitimately not remember certain details related to an attack because of the trauma. But when the story keeps changing constantly, that's a giveaway that it was just a story. Now, over at CNN, they finally made mention of the sworn statement sent by Ford's former boyfriend and attempted to basically counter it and say, well, you know, he's a guy, you know, we're not going to listen to him. But you need to remember that letter basically said in the 6 years that they were together. Ford never mentioned Kavanaugh, never mentioned the assault, certainly did not seem to be afraid of flying, was not afraid of enclosed spaces. And the story that she had about, putting that second door on her home to have an escape route, that one got busted. Apparently she wanted to subdivide her home and rent out part of it. It's just all fallen apart. And you knew this was going to happen. Michael Avenatti, Stormy Daniels' lawyer, came up with yet another Kavanaugh accuser, who is, of course, anonymous, and is accusing Kavanaugh of drugging drinks at parties for the purpose of sexually assaulting women. And it's starting to get very rancorous there in the hearing room, where you have Republicans are finally standing up and saying, this really is ridiculous. This is all a bunch of lies and smears. And of course, the Democrats are coming back and saying, well, the accuser has to be believed. The burden of proof is on Kavanaugh, which is not how it's supposed to work here in the United States of America. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, Mazie Hirono, she's the senator from here in Hawaii, and she was out there, telling, men, you should just shut up, do the right thing for a change. The accuser has to be believed. But over at the National Review, John Fund recalls that Hirono was singing a different tune in the early 1990s when a very powerful Democratic politician, the late Hawaii Senator Daniel Inouye, was credibly accused of rape and sexual misconduct by several women. And I remember when that whole thing went on down, and these women had come forward and made all these accusations, and Hirono was saying, oh, yeah, it couldn't possibly happen, couldn't possibly happen. The partisanship is on full display here. And this is backfiring on the Democratic Party, because somebody did a poll of Democrats, and 40% of them say that the behavior of the Democrats during the Kavanaugh confirmation process is a national disgrace, and I'm fully in agreement with that. It is a disgrace, and unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's over. It's moving out of the Senate Judiciary Committee. It's moving to the floor for the vote, but again, we're seeing all these protests all over and all kinds of just tantrum throwing here. And we mentioned before that over at Harvard, there's this group of feminists who are trying to invoke Title IX to get Kavanaugh blocked from ever lecturing or teaching on the campus ever again. The man has not been shown to be guilty. I mean, that's really what it comes on down to. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. Francis in Montreal, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. With all this furor about the Kavanaugh appointment, I've been getting actually sick of it, and I've been really following it closely, both with CNN and especially with Fox News. And Fox News is fun to watch. They have sexy women on and stuff. And but everybody's very partisan. But at the same time, there's been this creeping sensation over me that we're actually just watching a very preordained Freemasonic psychodrama. And a lot of the participants, actually, like the senators that are participating in this psychodrama for the public, almost seem to be ashamed of their role in it because it's so fraudulent. And the point of this is that who and what is Kavanaugh, and what does he represent? When you get past all this, shocking sex, rape stuff, what do you have there? And his testimony wasn't impressive. I mean, I wouldn't hire him if I was on trial for my life. I wouldn't hire a buffoon like him. Where did he come from? He's from the Bush camp, but that's not all. He is one of the main authors of the Patriot Act. And it's really something to watch all the somersaults that people have been following, like Alex Jones, for since 2003. And now they're pro Kavanaugh. Well, Kavanaugh wrote the Patriot Act, and that's not all. There's a really good lecture by Judge Andrew Napolitano up on YouTube. It's Judge Andrew Napolitano, how the courts killed natural law. And Judge Kavanaugh is an opponent of the Bill of Rights. There's a famous case that he adjudicated over where an author was communicating to Florence, Italy in Italian with a publisher. And they were talking in Italian, and the NSA decided to listen in on him without a warrant. He was in the United States calling Florence, Italy.
Yeah,
listening
I'm
without a
aware
warrant.
of the story. I'm aware of the story. Now, Francis, okay, you raise an interesting point here, and I'll be very honest. I'm not 100% happy with Kavanaugh either, but I would like to see the Supreme Court shift more conservative because of some of the lunacy that has come out of that building over the last couple of decades. But finally, we're talking about Kavanaugh himself, and it sort of underscores the fact that in the hearings for Kavanaugh, the Democrats never brought that up. It was always, he raped this girl, he did this, he was a bad person. They never really got around to talking about his qualifications. And
well, it's a psychodrama.
I don't think it's a psychodrama. There's a genuine fracturing of the two political parties, and the Democrats are in a panic because they don't want to see a conservative Supreme Court because it'll start to undo all of this liberal nonsense that has been foisted on us over the last couple of decades. This is a real fight, and it's very, very serious. And I'm surprised more people have not been physically hurt.
The Patriot Act?
Okay, I understand you don't like Kavanaugh. Okay, I get that. I get that you don't like Kavanaugh. I don't like the way he interpreted the Fourth Amendment either. Okay?
I don't say I like him or don't like him. It's just that he's a nobody. He's doing what bigger forces are telling him to do. He's obviously a
Aren't they all?
He's just a guy who reads law.
Aren't they all? In that Congress, in the White House, aren't they all doing what their backers and donors are telling them to do?
Yeah. Has anybody even mentioned this business?
All right. Okay. Let's stop the Kavanaugh bashing. I understand you're coming in with a particular point of view here. Who would you have preferred to see nominated to the Supreme Court as a conservative justice?
Isn't there anybody? I mean, in all the United States,
I'm asking you. You're coming in. You're complaining about Kavanaugh, but you don't have a solution.
Well, I'm not complaining about Kavanaugh. I'm complaining about this whole process where, it's this false dichotomy. You can choose between the lunatic left, and they want to have transvestites teaching children in school that it's good to have sex change operations. And then on the other hand, you've got this the emergency warfare state martial law. And there's nobody talking about what's really going on. That's what I don't care about Kavanaugh one way or the other. I've got no commitment here. I'm looking at this in terms of the broader meta scale. And it's just, I find it like nobody's even mentioned in all of this, is a corporation a person? At least Romney came out when he was running for president and said, yes, a corporation's a person. Well, yeah, it's a person that lives forever and can accumulate assets infinitely, and then it can overawe everybody else with its campaign donations and end up running the country.
Which is exactly what's happened.
Yeah. So I'm just sort of saying, there's needs. I love the United States. I love its Constitution. I'm a Canadian, but I'm watching you guys, and I'm going like, Jesus, come on, bring back the Constitution. Like, there's no need for a Patriot Act.
Well,
this is dangerous for everybody.
The reality is we've lost our Constitution. We, the American people, have lost our Constitution. We've lost our country. The people who stole it from us are not going to give it back. And because I do not advocate civil war or armed rebellion, we're just going to have to wait for it to fall apart, which may be happening sooner than people are expecting, but that's another topic entirely. But as far as the hearings are concerned, it was a real political fight. It was being played out to the public to try and sway people to call their senators and put pressure on them to vote a certain way. And I can imagine that's getting even more intense now that the hearings have come to the end. But again, I'm a person who thinks that we need to bring back civility in government, and we need to have everybody playing by the rules all the way up to the president himself. We don't have that, unfortunately, right now. What we have is a bunch of people who are screaming, for whatever it is they want, like a bunch of kindergarten children. And as far as the Republicans being the party of war, when I was a kid, that was the popular perception. But I mean, look at how, Democratic presidents and politicians are also on board the war machine. Both parties are fully on board with moving forward with this insanity.
Well, actually, I got one thing to say, but before I let you go, I don't want to take up too much time, but at Voltaire Network, or Thierry Meyssan's Voltaire Network, he's got an interesting series of articles, and if you actually look at what the Republicans have done with Iran, they're very bellicose to the American public, but in their actual deeds, they're actually really pro-Iran. Like, it was Cheney handed Iran at least 2/3 of Iraq by overthrowing Saddam Hussein. And even now, Pompeo is doing these delicate maneuvers behind the scenes, and it seems that the American Republican Party is actually very much pro-Iran. It's bizarre.
I don't read it the exact same way. I think the fact that Iran is now exerting more influence in Iraq as well as Syria represents a geopolitical failure on the part of U.S. foreign policy. From where I sit, the U.S. government, both parties are losing the agenda that was basically exposed by General Wesley Clark all the way back in, I think it was 2003. Where the plan was to have the U.S. exert control over all the Middle East, all the oil-producing nations, and Iran was on that list in order to guarantee that that oil would always be sold for the U.S. dollar.
Well, I just want to harken back before I go to what Karl Marx said about in his biography of Lord Palmerston, and he was saying that the British were never so much the friends of Russia as when they were pretending to be their enemy, and they were never so much the enemy of Russia as when they were pretending to be their friends. And I get that funny feeling that they're playing the same game here with Iran, and that the louder and more bellicose they're blustering, the more they're actually doing to help Iran, in actual fact.
Well,
anyway,
I disagree with you. I have a different take. I think they're basically failing in the Middle East, and it's for certain that Israel is going to be calling for war with Iran. And Sheldon Adelson, of course, who's very pro-Israel, is the single biggest donor. He's pouring all kinds of money into the midterm campaigns to maintain GOP control of the House and Senate. So clearly, Sheldon Adelson, and through him Israel, believe the Republicans are going to be tough on Iran. Anyway, listen, Francis, we're going to let you go here and switch over to Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I was a very smart caller, but I think he misunderstands politics. I mean, Trump's coming in and using populism. You can't just go and expose the Illuminati and do away with the Patriot Act overnight. You have to take over a party and then change your party, which I think Trump is doing, away from the rhinos and the neocons to a nationalist, populist party. And this whole Kavanaugh thing is so brilliant for him. As far as now, there's an article in the Wall Street Journal, we're all deplorables now.
Yeah, I saw
He's unifying the Republican Party. The next elections, they're all going to be a new set of all Trumpians in the Congress and the Senate, and they're going to owe a lot of it to Trump and this fight where the Democrats have committed suicide before your eyes.
Yes.
And I think Trump's also shown that he fights for his people. George Bush would have yanked Kavanaugh weeks ago, and Trump went to the mattresses for this guy, and there's something to be said for that.
I agree with you on that. I agree with you on that. I just wish Trump hadn't surrounded himself with so many of the old Bush-era neocon hardliners. Anyway, Joe, going to have to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And yes, once again, we are standing before you in our beggar's rags, asking for your help. You can see how much money is being spent by the money junkies, the politicians, to lie to you, to trick you. And we're asking for very, very little, relatively speaking, to keep on telling you the truth. So if you want to be lied to, that's fine. If you need to know the truth, if you want to know the truth, then we do need your help. And I'm sorry that we do keep asking, but it is a reality. All of the independent media are under attack. Our advertisers are harassed. Now we're starting to see payment processing systems hold up money. It's getting very ugly out there. So we do need your help, and there's no such thing as too small a donation. The postal address, if you want to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number to make a debit or credit card donation or to pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1. And don't forget that Frontside Firearms Academy deal. That's a sweet, sweet deal. And you should seriously think about taking advantage of that. The network thanks you, and we're going to go back to the phones here to Scott in California. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Am I on the air now?
You're on the air now.
Hello? Oh, okay. You know what? A day or so ago, I was reminded of something that you said in the run-up to the 2016 election, because the entire establishment was against Trump, and you said either this is the biggest psyop in history or Trump is the real deal. And that's what's happening with Kavanaugh. So there must be something about Kavanaugh is totally freaking somebody out. And I noticed that the Jesuit magazine titled America came out against him. Georgetown University came out against him. The American Bar Association, of all institutions. So he must be okay if everybody hates him.
Yeah, that's definitely a part of it. And, of course, apparently he was involved in some litigation involving the Clintons and did not cut them any slack. And so that's probably the reason that that whole Clinton clique, if you will, do not want him in there.
Yeah, sure. And then Vince Foster, too. I think he was pressing for an investigation of Vince Foster. Then Kavanaugh got shut down on that.
Yeah, the story,
anyway,
unfortunately, is being spun to make it look like Kavanaugh was part of the cover-up. But as I dug more and more into it, it does look like he was trying to do the job the right way, but he got shut down. And so many of the mid and low-level investigators in the Foster case, they were simply shut down. Evidence was destroyed. Talk about Democratic cover-ups. That certainly was one from top to bottom.
Well, I've watched people testify in a courtroom under oath, for example, and sometimes when you have these people who have credentials, I watched a doctor one time, and it took me, she was testifying, it took me 2.5 minutes to understand that she was lying, and with this Ford person, it took about 45 seconds. So maybe I'm getting better at it. Anyway, talk to you later, Michael. Thanks.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open, and apparently we got a comment off the air. Somebody called on in, very unhappy about U.S. expats who have left the country, and they call into the show to badmouth the United States. Well, we do have a First Amendment, and it's hard to find much that's good about the United States these days. We've become a global bully, a huge drain on the resources of the rest of the world. We're seeing a government literally at war with itself. The political polarization in the country right now is at record levels and threatens to turn into violence. In fact, I'm watching the video feed of these protests that are happening over Kavanaugh. Apparently, there are already arrests that are taking place. All right, another quick little story. This is weird. Up in Maine, WAGM TV is reporting that the University of Maine offered credits to students who would harass Susan Collins into voting no on Kavanaugh. And it's another reminder that the university, well, all of education has become part of the liberal establishment, and they're not even shy about it. So I imagine that Senator Jeff Flake is feeling a little angry right now, realizing that he got played by those two paid professional activists who are trying to pretend to be ordinary American girls. Oh, we're victims of sexual assault. We believe her. You've got to investigate. And they railroaded him into calling for that 1 week extended FBI background check. And they're paid activists. So Senator David Perdue is saying it's time to ignore these protesters. They have a clearly partisan agenda, and it's time to start playing defense. We'll be back with a phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go right back to the phones here to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, before I want to talk about what I want to buy, I had to go to the store today, Walmart, and in line, you know what I saw? I saw a Time Commemorative Edition magazine on John McCain, A Patriot's Life, and not one of them in that particular line was even taken out of the... So it looked like nobody bought him, at least in the line, you know, the aisle I was in. I'm like, I bet you that don't have pictures of him meeting with al-Baghdadi and the right sector...
Yeah,
the right
probably
sector in Ukraine.
All his ISIS buddies here. Did you hear what Time Magazine is doing? Did you hear what Time Magazine's doing this week?
No.
They have Christine Ford's face on the cover as this graphic that's made up of all the statements she made about Kavanaugh.
Oh, Time Magazine's just another. That's why it's right next to the other rag tabloids.
Yeah,
it's garbage now.
Yep.
Same with Newsweek. Michael Isikoff, isn't he part of the Newsweek group and all that?
I do not recall off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's all garbage. Hey, Mike, I wanted to talk about Russia first, where Putin is in India, and he's making deals on military, and also they're going to build a new reactor in India, and probably talking about with the S-400, because you notice how India didn't back down with that, because they remember the British too well. You know, they're not going to be taking they're their own country now.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, they don't need to be told what to do and who to make deals with. Isn't it amazing, like, you buy stuff from us, or, like, that is anti-capitalism, if you know. I mean, yeah, they are selling weapons, but that's totally anti-capitalism. I mean, my God, isn't it? Whose business is it that they buy whatever from who? You know, I mean, I don't understand this way of thinking. You know,
this way of thinking is, you know, that, you know, we want to sell our products, and anything that we can do to make sure that the competition stays away, you know, is going to boost our profitability. Now, I understand that India has applied to the United States government for a waiver on that S-400 sale. They probably will not get it. And in turn, I suspect they may just go ahead and buy it anyway.
Yeah, because India's been with the Russians since, like, the Soviet Union days. I mean, they helped joint develop the Su-57 stealth fighter that Russia has. They also built and helped co-develop the BrahMos anti-ship missile, which is fastest anti-ship missile in the world. And they're working on BrahMos too. So, I mean, they got a lot of big you're talking about billions and billions and billions of dollars. They're not going to pass that up, you know, because remember, India, the president also has his military to contend with, and they got their own lucrative deals with the Russians, you know what I mean? So everybody's got their hands in the till, the cookie jar, you know, for that at least.
Yeah, there's a lot of money to pull. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, no, that's what I was going to switch gears, but talking about this Israeli minister said that we got ways to get around the S-300. Now, if that was true, how long has it been since the last strike? You know?
Yeah. Well, there's a restraining factor at work here. The S-300s have been deployed in Syria, but it's going to take 90 days to train the Syrian crews. So as of right now, those radars and missile systems are being run by Russian personnel. And I would hope that the United States and Israel are are not going to go ahead and start killing Russians, because that is really going to escalate things.
But they're also being protected by Spetsnaz, those S-300 batteries. So I wonder if they're going to keep those Spetsnaz protecting those missile systems after the Syrians take over the duties of operating them. You know what I mean? Because if they get attacked, then they just kill Russian soldiers.
Well,
But, the
Spetsnaz are there to prevent somebody coming up and trying to sabotage the units. But you need to remember, they're also very mobile. They're constantly on the move. No, what Israel's talking about is an air attack, either with their F-35s or just outright missiles. And it may be the U.S. and Israeli strategy to just force Syria to use up all those S-300s by continually flinging missiles at them. And then it becomes a war of attrition.
And then I want to switch gears on, was it Francis from Canada, I believe he called, about Iran. We tried to do the coup and the civil war and all that in Syria. We're not, let me tell you, Iran is the next, I mean, this is all a global thing. Iran is next, and Russia is going to be next. This is not going to stop. Dick Cheney was no friend of Iran. None of these people are no friends with any of these countries. So Iran is the target, Russia is the target, and China, because if you look, China's the target. Mike Pence's statement comes out, the real threat is China now.
Yes.
You know, China's, is interfering with our midterms. Can you imagine if they said India's interfering with our midterm? I mean, come on.
Israel is interfering with our midterms. I mean, look, it's ridiculous to constantly harp about Russia interference in our internal politics, or China interfering with our internal politics. Saudi Arabia interferes with our internal politics. Great Britain interferes with our internal politics. Every government on earth tries to influence the political future of countries around the world, both friend and enemy. In fact, when we talk about the U.S. program of covert regime change, some of the countries on that list include countries that are supposed to be allies, like France. The U.S. actually tried to regime change France at one point. So this is all for public consumption, and it's part of this propaganda run-up to convince us all that Russia is just incredibly evil, and China is close behind. But I don't know that they're getting traction with it, though, because it's a very different mindset in the American population. Certainly nobody around here that I talk to is buying any of this nonsense.
Well, you know why, Mike? Because it's just like with propaganda. You do need a dupe to believe it, but after a certain amount of time, and you keep hearing the same thing, and they switch gears, adding somebody else onto there, eventually you start to figure out it's all BS. All right, Mike, have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Dustin. We're going to let you go here. I saw a quick banner go by on Fox News about how a Democratic senator was reviewing the FBI report, and he's stopped for the day and will continue tomorrow. As I understand it, it's only 40 pages long. So again, stall, delay. Over in the world of corporate media, on CBS this morning, they interviewed Chelsea Clinton about the allegations of sexual misconduct against Brett Kavanaugh, gave her 3.5 minutes of airtime, but never got around to asking about the multiple allegations against former President Bill Clinton. Because Bill Clinton is a Democrat, and that makes it all okay. We're only here to skewer and condemn the conservatives. All right. As one of our callers mentioned, there was an article that came out in the Wall Street Journal, and the gist of the article is that the Democrats' antics during the Kavanaugh hearings have reminded the anti-Trump conservatives the left hates them even more than it hates the president, and that the net result of all of this is the Republican Party is being reunified to a degree that even Trump himself would not be able to do. And basically ended the article saying, we are all deplorables now. So, all right, back to the phones. Frank in London, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I just wanted to say, about the Democrats. I have to congratulate them the way they managed to assist in the unification of the Republicans. They couldn't do a better job. You know, I think it's admirable. These people. I'm just wondering if these people get into power. Could you imagine the level of incompetence the government would descend to? It would be like putting a combination of Harold Lloyd, Laurel and Hardy, and all these people to run the government.
Yeah, with a touch of Rambo thrown in, because it got business out there.
Yeah. It's these people. I've looked at them properly, and I think something is collectively seriously wrong with their psyche. I don't know if they have some sort of hypnosis in the. I don't know. It's just this collective insanity, a form of accepted collective insanity. That's what it is. You know, I've never seen
because
anything
the Democratic
like this.
Party is bankrupt on ideas. They don't have anything to offer. They've gone so far to the left with all this nonsense about transgenderism, and men are allowed to use the women's restroom and everything, that none of that resonates with the American people. And so the Democratic Party has become the party of the whiners and the snowflakes, which doesn't represent a significant voting bloc. The Democrats are literally depending on illegal immigrant voting to try and carry the day in the midterms. But the reason for all the antics and the shift to the hard left is they simply ran out of ideas. They've completely run out of ideas how to make this country better for the American people.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. And I think what they have done, as far as I can see, they have aroused the wrath of the grassroots people in the Republican Party. I think these people, if I think they conversely they're campaigning for the Republicans. Because there's no way, I can't see any blue wave with that kind of behavior. It's very frightening. I'd say something is totally wrong with the population psyche if they vote those incompetent lunatics into power.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at places in the United States like Baltimore, that've been under Democratic control for decades, and they're in terrible condition. Dangerous cities. The Democrats don't actually know how to make things work, is what it comes on down to. And if you look at the early origins of the Democratic Party, you will understand why.
Right. Okay, Mike, thanks for giving me the opportunity.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Okay. Do you remember, as part of the terror campaign, which is really what it is, where the GOP senators were being doxxed? And what that means, it's a slang term for having your personal, private information published on the internet. Your address, your phone number, other information. And it is a form of intimidation. Because there's an implied threat. If you don't go the way that we want you to go, now we know where you live, to paraphrase Maxine Water. And so it does count as terrorism. And if you will remember, the threat of force to coerce somebody to change their political views is defined as an act of terror under the USA Patriot Act. And so I'm sure a lot of you will join me in saying that these people should be down in Guantanamo. Forget about those wrongfully accused, Iraq has a nuclear bomb, people who are down there. We have terrorists on our soil right now. The good news is they got one of them. A gentleman named Jackson Costco is the one who basically doxed the GOP senators. And apparently he was an unpaid intern for Sheila Jackson Lee, previously worked for Senator Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire, California's Barbara Boxer, and Costco was recently listed in the Senate Directory phone book as Hassan's Legislative Correspondence Systems Administrator. which apparently he left that job in May of 2018. But they're all riled up, and they're just engaging in this behavior. And this guy has been arrested, and hopefully he's going to spend a little time in jail. Okay, over at the University of Texas at Austin, there's a group, a campus group, the Young Conservatives of Texas, who wanted to put up a little table display to confirm Kavanaugh. And they were there being very peaceful and just presenting out information. And they got confronted by a crowd of liberal students who just screamed at them, tore up pamphlets, just didn't want to talk, didn't want to engage, just scream at them to make them go away. And that, I think, right there is a major difference between modern conservatives and modern liberals. Modern conservatives, we've become the new intellectuals. We're willing to think, we're willing to talk, we're willing to engage in debate, and we have to engage in debate. If this polarization between conservatives and liberals gets any worse, the conversation will stop, and then we're stuck. The next step after that is violence in the streets. Down at Judicial Watch, they have filed a House ethics complaint against Maxine Waters for her many statements inciting violence and assaults on members of the Trump cabinet and conservatives in general. And, of course, even though she violated the House rules, don't know how much is going to happen. It's a slap on the wrist situation. But I'm glad Judicial Watch did that. We all have to start holding these people accountable for their behavior. It's not just enough to watch it on TV and say, oh, that's really not very good. We have to speak out and say, that is unacceptable behavior for a member of the United States Congress. Now, there were also these very suspicious mailings where there were 2 letters that went to the Pentagon and 1 to the White House that tested positive for ricin. Well, it turned out, thankfully, there was no ricin. The mail had been contaminated with castor seeds, which is the raw material from which ricin is made, and it can trigger a false positive on the test. So they found this U.S. Navy veteran in Utah, and they've arrested him, William Clyde Allen III, 39 years old, taken into custody. It's getting dangerous out there when people just take it on themselves to act like this without restraint. Anyway, we got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And talking about violence, of course, we know there was that shooter at the GOP softball training last year. And then there was the attack on Rand Paul, which was very, very serious. And his wife has basically come on out with an editorial, if you will, a letter, basically saying that their family's experiencing violence, threats of violence, that it's been absolutely horrifying. There's intimidation. And that when Rand Paul was just working in the yard, and a neighbor, or this man, just attacked him, breaking 6 ribs, which is a serious injury, lung damage, apparently had to deal with pneumonia. And the reason that she was coming out with this now was in response to all of these media personnel who think this is okay, that this is acceptable behavior. MSNBC commentator Casey Hunt laughed on the air that Rand's assault was one of her favorite stories. And you have people like Cher, Bette Midler, and others lauded the attacker on Twitter. And I find that just absolutely amazing that these celebrities are out there doing that. And Rand Paul's wife ends by saying, I hope that these women never have to watch someone they love struggle to move or even breathe for months on end. And it says something about, the culture and just how far left Hollywood pretty much has gone. Okay, getting into other political news here. Former top FBI lawyer James Baker apparently is cooperating and is reported to have given explosive closed-door testimony yesterday to congressional investigators how the Russia probe was handled in an abnormal fashion, reflecting political bias. This is coming from two of the Republican lawmakers who were present for the deposition. Representative Mark Meadows was on Fox News saying this witness confirmed that things were done in an abnormal fashion that's extremely troubling. And yes, I saw the story fly by on the Fox News feed here. And Meadows is saying the abnormal handling of the probe into Russian collusion was a reflection of inherent bias evident in certain circles. And of course, when you couple that with all those text messages between Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, yeah, there was a bias. The deep state is clearly afraid of Trump, because the deep state is happy only when the deep state controls everything and everybody. And anybody who is not under their complete control is a threat. Because I'm sure that Trump understands the realities of politics in Washington, D.C. But if there were to be something that broke loose and really started to expose it all, whose side would Trump be on? The deep state or Trump's side? And that may be why they're nervous about him. Maybe the same reason they're so opposed to Kavanaugh. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be back with hour number 2 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we were talking about Mark Meadows, who was being interviewed on Fox News following this closed-door session in which an FBI agent did confirm there was a lot of unusual, his word was abnormal, behavior regarding this Trump-Russia collusion investigation that revealed a clear political bias at work there. So in that same interview, Meadows came on out and said there is a strong suggestion that undercover FBI sources taped the Trump campaign. And we're talking about before there was that FISA warrant. And just saying that extraordinary measures were used to surveil. So that's how out of control the FBI is here. Apparently, congressional investigators have confirmed that a top FBI official met with Democratic Party lawyers to talk about allegations of Donald Trump and Russia weeks before the 2016 election and before the Bureau secured a search warrant targeting Trump's campaign. So there's your collusion right there. They were working on this before they even had a surveillance warrant. And then they couldn't find anything, so they ginned up that Christopher Steele dossier and used it to get a FISA warrant to make it all look like it was legit and above board. Except the dossier was a fraud here. Now the story coming out here that apparently Clinton lawyers were feeding anti-Trump information to the FBI. And apparently Catherine Herridge is reporting that sources familiar with the congressional investigation tell Fox that a lawyer for the DNC Clinton campaign was the previously unknown source providing evidence to the FBI Russia probe in 2016. Okay. Now, a little bit of good news here. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has been subpoenaed to appear before a grand jury, and he has been subpoenaed to provide certain documents related to the McCabe memos, basically the whole Russiagate situation. They want to see the documents, and it'll be interesting to see if he refuses, which could land him in hot water here. Now, lost behind all this Kavanaugh circus, there are some developments happening, and maybe Robert Mueller was kind of glad for the respite from being out of the public eye. But now that this Kavanaugh thing appears to finally be winding down, short of exploding into civil war, the public attention is going to shift back on to this other witch hunt that Mueller was conducting against Donald Trump. But now we're getting a report here. This is coming out of Russia Today. 2 of the prosecutors from Robert Mueller's team have stepped down. And that may signal that that part of the probe is winding down. And of course, after all these months and all that money, they came up with absolutely nothing to document collusion between Trump and Russia. And yet the liberal media is still out there pushing that. Oh, yes, there was collusion. It was collusion. Hillary was pushing that the other day. Remember, we were talking about how she's still bitter about 2016? And she was like, yeah, there was definitely collusion. There was definitely collusion. They stole that election from me. So it is a circus, but I guess the clowns are getting tired here. And again, all this talk about Russian interference in Western politics, what about Israel? What about Saudi Arabia? What about the United Arab Emirates? I'm looking at a story over here, a member just posted. Google manipulates 25% of the world's elections. This focus on Russia is intentional. It's part of the war propaganda. And this article that I'm looking at is basically quoting reporters in the corporate media who are saying they are under pressure to basically expand the Russian threat, to put the focus on that. That's not news reporting, that's propaganda. And of course, behind it all, there's still that big question. How many illegal immigrants are going to get away with voting in our election? Because it is against the law for non-citizens to vote in our elections. Soros is shelling out another $500 million for groups that support the migrants and the illegal immigrants. And as we reported yesterday, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement is reporting there's a noticeable increase, a surge in illegals just walking across that border into our country. Now, I mentioned this yesterday, but I'm going to mention it again because you need to sort of keep it in mind. On Wednesday, September 26th, there was a resolution, House Resolution 1071, expressing disapproval of non-citizen illegal aliens voting in U.S. elections, which is a criminal act. Now, a resolution, of course, is not a law, and it's not really binding. And despite that, 71 Democrats outright voted no. 69 Democrats basically just said present. 4 Democrats refused to vote at all. So in effect, 144 Democrats refused to agree with the resolution that it is wrong for illegal aliens to vote in U.S. elections. And that has got to be a warning sign that that's going to be a major part of their effort to steal this election in 5 weeks. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Let's turn over to the war zones. There's a lot going on. And apparently, ISIS executed another civilian hostage captured by the terrorist group during the July 25th attack on the government-controlled areas in eastern al-Suwaida. And the hostage was killed by 2 shots in the head. The terrorist group also demanded the Syrian army to stop its anti-ISIS operation in the area of al-Safa and to release several female members of the terrorist group from prisons. And I think Syria is taking the same position that the United States does. You do not negotiate with terrorists and hostage takers, which is bad news for those people who are still hostages. Now, despite the ISIS demands, it's unlikely the Syrian army will abandon its efforts to clear the al-Safa pocket from ISIS members, because this would mean the terrorist threat would remain in southern Syria. No chance of it being eliminated. And Syria wants it gone. They want it gone. Russian television has released footage of the delivery of one of the S-300 batteries. It was being offloaded from a transport plane in Syria, and they were showing all the little bits and pieces of it. And so they're all up and running, and Russian personnel are operating them as well as training the Syrian forces who will use them. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. Karen in Maryland, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, that was quick. Hi there. I have a question about ATM machines. And, okay. My position on ATMs is that they should not be relied upon or depended upon. I went to my credit union the other day, and I asked for all of their applications and brochures associated with ATM use, and they gave them to me. And not one of them had the disclosure that I was looking for, because, see, my position on ATMs is that you're under the assumption that the ATM works when you can go to the ATM when the bank is not available, when the bank is not open. And most of us have become pretty reliant and dependent upon ATM use to the point where we don't even go to the bank anymore while it's open. We just use the ATM. But correct me if I'm wrong, that there is no guarantee from the bank that if the credit union closes and the ATM is all you have to work with, there's no guarantee that the ATM is going to be available or you're even going to have access to your account. And my position is that the ATM is basically a stepping stone that, is being used. You went from the credit union being open with no ATM, which was the case about 50 years ago. Now you have the ATM open, so once you become completely reliant and dependent upon the ATM, what in the world are you going to do if the ATM isn't open or the ATM is not available and the credit union is closed? Do you see where I'm going? And is the ATM a stepping stone to you not having access to your account at all?
No, I don't see it as that. Basically, there's a push for a cashless society. Banks, of course, are very sensitive to public opinion. And so if the ATM isn't giving you your money in the off hours, that's not intentional on their part. Anyway, that's not really something that I'm an expert on. So, Karen, we're going to thank you for the phone call and let you go here and get on back to the show, to the war zones. And apparently up in Raqqa, the U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces are on alert. Apparently they're under attack by unknown gunmen. And this seems to be something that we're starting to see in the rebel-held areas, that these various groups are starting to fight amongst each other. And whether that is to capture each other's weapons or simply because they don't like each other. Obviously, for Syria itself, this is a positive thing when your enemy is starting to squabble amongst themselves. So, apparently there are also popular uprisings taking place against the Syrian Democratic Forces. The Syrian people want all of these U.S.-backed groups gone. They want the U.S. gone. Meanwhile, a spokesperson for the Turkish president, Ibrahim Kalin, the name of the spokesman, accused the U.S. of purposely delaying the implementation of the Marabij roadmap. And Turkey is saying it should be implemented as quickly as possible so that Turkey can take steps to ensure its national security against terror groups in Syria. And this came just a day after Erdogan blasted the U.S. over their failure to remove all the YPG elements from Manbij. Say that 3 times fast. So it looks like the U.S. is playing kind of a double game here, where they're trying to make nice with Turkey and say, yes, we're going to secure the border, we're going to get rid of all these negative elements, but the elements are still there. turning to Yemen, apparently the United Arab Emirates, which is part of Saudi Arabia's coalition, are over in Africa recruiting Africans to take part in this war on the people of Yemen. And they're recruiting tribesmen from northern and central parts of Africa to fight in the war. And they're offering financial inducements, and in other words, they're hiring mercenaries. The question is, how well will they fight? Because these are not trained mercenaries. They're basically transplanted farmers and herdsmen. But it may suggest that a larger ground assault is preparing to happen, and Saudi Arabia doesn't want to send its own people here. Now, as the war on Yemen intensifies, it in turn is sparking stronger retaliatory attacks, where the Yemenis are starting to fire more and more rockets into Saudi Arabia. And so the situation continues to escalate, and meanwhile, of course, the children of Yemen are suffering from malnutrition. They're also dealing with that cholera outbreak, which is now the worst one in the world, and it is accelerating. There are now 10,000 suspected cases reported per week, according to the World Health Organization. Now, cholera has been used in the past as a biological weapon, and the sudden emergence and rapid spread of cholera in Yemen raises the possibility it's been done again. Clearly, you can see that Saudi Arabia is not concerned about committing war crimes or being held to account for them. There's one other possibility that may happen relative to Yemen. Apparently, in southern Yemen, there's a large group of Yemenis who actually side with Saudi Arabia against the Houthis. And what they call the Southern Transitional Council is preparing a takeover of South Yemen. There could be a split. They could basically take Yemen and split it north and south. I don't know what that would do for the war effort. Okay, this story is kind of weird, and it's a head scratcher. The United States Senate has unanimously passed Senate Resolution 610, which calls for the full declassification and release of tens of thousands of pages of documents relating to Saudi Arabia and the terrorist attacks of 9/11. Now, we know that ever since 9/11, a lot of people have been trying to accuse Saudi Arabia of this, and so now they're going to release all this documentation. Why are they doing it now? I mean, first of all, obviously they're ignoring the culpability of Israel in 9/11, but why are they doing this right now? The United States is dependent on Saudi Arabia to be their proxy in Yemen. Saudi Arabia is getting all buddy-buddy with Israel. Why annoy them now is the question here. All right, let's take another phone call. Thomas in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, I've been listening intermittently, and a while ago I heard you talking about Kavanaugh and whatnot. And as I recall, you were quite concerned about the Vince Foster cover-up, which is actually what initiated you into the cause of what we're all involved in today. And for what it's worth, you know, if you go on the internet, they do talk about the fact that a guy called Miguel Rodriguez, who was an independent district attorney, was first put on the investigation.
Yes.
And he came to the conclusion that it was a homicide.
Yes.
And then he was demoted.
Hello?
Kenneth Starr was the conclusion that Foster killed himself. And I thought, that's awfully concerning to me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Perhaps he might not be the best guy. You know, just to go by that, I know it's kind of a sensitive situation with everybody because they want him so badly. But you were asking, well, who would you elect? You know, Judge Napolitano would be an excellent Supreme Court justice. And another person that comes to my mind is there's an attorney in Florida named Chris Ann Hall, and she teaches the Constitution, and she is an attorney, whether that's a requirement or not. And she has got the Constitution memorized, and she has the Federalist Papers memorized. I guarantee you she could probably get involved with a conversation with any of our Supreme Court justices and probably embarrass.
Well, I'll tell you who I would like to see have been nominated. I don't know if Larry Klayman has the qualifications for the job, but I'd like to see him on the bench, or if not that, get him up there as a special prosecutor. But here's the thing. We are way, way past this idea of who we should nominate to the Supreme Court. President Trump gets to do that. That's one of the perks that comes with the job. And now we're just dealing with this political circus that we're seeing from the Democrats, who have just embarrassed themselves, even to the point where 40% of Democrats say that this was really out of control. So we're just going to have to live with that. And I'm going to have to let you go. We're coming up on a commercial break.
Okay, can I say one more thing?
All right, stay on the line. I'll come right back to you after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And we're still talking with Thomas in Florida. And you wanted to say one more thing.
Yes, kind of going back to what I originally started to talk about when I first called in. If indeed Mr. Kavanaugh was involved in the obstruction of evidence that Mr. Rodriguez was uncovering, would he not then be accessory to at least the obstruction of evidence, if not accessory to a homicide? And is that the quality type of person we want on our Supreme Court bench?
Okay, well, look, I have issues with Kavanaugh over his interpretations of the Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, and I have serious questions about his performance during the Vince Foster affair. But he is the man that was appointed by Donald Trump, and we are past the point of saying, let's do a last-minute substitution. It's not going to happen. Now, if we have another Supreme Court justice leave the bench for whatever reason, then we can renew the discussion about who would be best to sit on the bench. But right now, Kavanaugh is what we've got, and he's moving forward toward a confirmation. And again, even though I'm not 100% happy with him, there's probably nobody out there I'd be 100% happy with. Let's all be honest about that. We're not going to agree with everything that any potential Supreme Court justice believes in. And so let's just understand we go with the best that we've got, which right now is Kavanaugh. I do want to see the Supreme Court shift back to a conservative court after all the nonsense the liberals have dished out on us over the last several years. So thank you for the phone call, and we're going to switch over to Mateus in Canada. Aloha, Mateus. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I want to talk about Zionism, but first I wanted to mention something regarding the Trump was, quote, Trump appeared briefly flustered, then smiled and said it was not the reaction he expected, but that's all right. Then later he brushed off the episode and telling reporters, oh, it was great. Well, that was meant to get some laughter, so it was great. So that's regarding how he got laughed at the UN. And he said, while he's getting laughed at, he said it's not the reaction he expects. And then after that, he was lying and saying that he did it on purpose just to get a laugh. And then look what a liar this guy is. Like, this other quote here. Quote, we ask all nations to isolate Iran's regime as long as its aggression continues. I mean, but talk about the pot calling the kettle black.
Yes.
The president has removed the U.S. from the 2015 nuclear accord with Iran because of Iran's destabilizing actions throughout the region and support for terrorist groups like Hezbollah. And he accused Iran of sowing chaos, death, and destruction. I mean, talk about projection.
Yes.
And then you got this Bolton, who's a hardcore Zionist, self-admitted Zionist. Some of his underlings have whistleblowed in saying that they're really afraid that this guy is wanting the tribulation to happen, and he's in a position to actually start a nuclear war with other countries that have nuclear weapons.
Yeah, that
so here's
really
Bolton
worries me.
That says, yeah, he actually, on a podium, casually referred to something that's going to happen after the tribulation. This is insane. And so, okay, he says, quote, if you cross us, our allies or our partners, he's referring to Iran, or if you harm our citizens, if you choose to lie, cheat, and deceive, yes, there will indeed be hell to pay. I mean, give me a break. Like, that's all the U.S. does is lie, cheat, deceive, sowing chaos and death.
Yes.
But for people that don't really understand what Zionist means, the place to go is what Rivero already referred, is No More News, KNOW, More News. That's all they really talk about. So if you just want to crash course on what Zionism is, and then come back to what really happened to kind of keep up with everything else. But I just want to say that Zionism, what this means is that there's a zealous belief that the Jews will rule the world from the Temple Mount in Jerusalem after the Golden Dome of the Rock is destroyed, which is currently obviously owned by the Muslims.
Yep.
And then the Jewish people are going to build a third temple and rule the world from that temple. But their Messiah will come and sit on the throne. They're going to have temple service and daily sacrifices of animals in the morning and the evening, special occasions. But it'll be a false Messiah. It's actually going to be the Antichrist on that throne. Then there has to be a big, huge Armageddon, where a big conflagration, where pretty much the whole world's going to be destroyed. Then the real Messiah will come back. And this is Jesus from the perspective of the extremist zealot Christians. That'll be Jesus coming back, but from the perspective of the Jews, that'll be, their Messiah.
Okay, well, you've
then
drifted,
we're all going to be their slaves.
Hang on. You've drifted away from what Zionism is into that whole Schofield Bible end times mythology. We're almost out of time here, so I had to cut you off here. But going on back, you raised an important point we've touched on before. There are an alarming number of people in the United States of America, including people in positions of power, who are absolutely convinced that if they can help Israel set the world on fire, Jesus is going to come on down and invite them up to the big house. And it's a very scary idea that there are people who want to bring that about, who want to bring about the end of the world.
Yeah, Trump is one of them. Trump believes this. Trump's a Zionist. Bolton's a Zionist. Sheldon Adelson.
I don't know that Trump believes that. Trump believes in making money. Mateus, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And as we reported earlier in the week, the United Nations highest court has ordered the United States to lift sanctions on Iran that affect imports of humanitarian goods and products. And in addition, we didn't have this before, products and services linked to civil aviation safety. Now, this ruling by the International Court of Justice is legally binding, but it remains to be seen if the administration of Trump will comply, and my guess is no, because the United States has repeatedly ignored the rulings of the International Court of Justice. And if you recall, not too long ago, Bolton was out there with this, we're above the law. They don't have jurisdiction over us. We're the exceptional nation here. Pompeo is out there saying that Iran is a source of threats, or is the source of threats to Americans in Iraq. And he's basically responding to the protests in Basra that have forced the closure of the U.S. consulate in that port city. And the Pentagon is getting ready to evacuate personnel from the site. Well, Pompeo doesn't want you to think that maybe the people of Iraq don't want the Americans to be there anymore. So, of course, it has to be an Iranian plot. Of course, it's the hand of the Ayatollah and his henchmen that are behind these attacks on the United States. The people of Iraq love us. I mean, just because we blew their country up and made it an economic disaster zone and lynched their leader, it's no reason for them not to love us. Okay, remember when Benjamin Netanyahu got up before the UN General Assembly and he started hurling all these accusations? Iran has a hidden warehouse of nuclear materials. Hezbollah is building missile sites in Lebanon to attack us with, both of which have now been discredited. It turns out that pretty much everybody in that room were not impressed And probably that's because so many of them remember that silly cartoon bomb that he did. But he got low scores on that. But I guess Netanyahu's idea is just keep hurling the accusations. If you keep hurling the accusations, people will eventually believe it. Or they'll just get so tired of fending it off, they'll say, okay, Iran is bad. Israel is basically talking tough about the development of the S-300s in Syria. Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman basically said Israel cannot give up operations in Syria. Not will not, cannot. And he's saying we're not happy about the presence of the S-300, but we're not looking for adventures, but we have to protect our vital interests. And apparently Israel's vital interest is going on into Syria and blowing stuff up. And they like being able to do it at low risk, but the risk just went on up. Now, there's an Israeli minister, Tsaki Hanagba, the country's regional cooperation minister. He's a non-voting member of the Security Cabinet. Basically came on out and said, the S-300 systems cannot detect our stealth fighters. It's a blanket declaration. Doesn't matter. It's going to be completely invisible. And we're going to be able to fly right in and destroy them right on the ground. Well, there are two problems with that. First of all, the closer you get to that radar, the more visible you're going to become. There's no such thing as perfect stealth. In fact, they don't even use that word much anymore. It's low observable. And that's what all that engineering is about, to reduce your radar cross-section. But those are powerful search radars on those air defense systems, because they have to be able to see out way past as far as those missiles can fly, which is a long distance. If you're flying right at that radar, there will be a point where they'll get a hit off of you. The second thing that needs to be remembered, and somebody commented on this story, that all that Israel knows about the S-300 is based on a very early design that was sold to Greece, that Israel was able to go on over and take a look at. And nobody really knows how the S-300 has been improved since then. And we did have that monograph that somebody sent me the other day saying that, yes, Russia has found ways around stealth for small aircraft like fighters. I hope they're not going to put it to the test, because that could really kick off a World War III for real. I mean, we're already in World War III. Let's accept that. Right now, they're just doing it slowly in the hope that you won't notice. Anyway, as I mentioned before on that phone call, it's going to take 3 months to train Syrian specialists to use the Russian S-300 air defense systems. And they're already out there. They're deployed. And that means that for those 3 months, these systems will be operated by Russian experts. And I hope that will be a deterrent, because I don't think either Israel or the United States wants to launch an attack, a deliberate attack, that kills Russian forces, because that too would be an escalation. Okay, up in Israel, there's been a lot of going back and forth about this Palestinian Bedouin village, Khan al-Amar. And it's located east of the occupied Jerusalem, Al-Quds. And there's been this long fight where Israel tears it down, they build it up, tear it down, build it up. And Israel's now going to demolish it again. There was a court fight about this. The settlers living nearby have been flooding the grounds of this village with raw sewage, which is a very common tactic that you see coming out of those settlements here. But apparently the village has now been surrounded by armored vehicles, effectively a siege, which signals that the bulldozers are going to be there at any time. Now, we have talked before about this group called the Canary Mission. And what the Canary Mission does is it tracks college students who are pro-Palestinian or critical of Israel, and it makes a database. And the purpose of the database is to ruin these students' chances at a high-paying job or higher education in order to scare them into silence or to coerce them into supporting Israel, which, as I mentioned before, the threat of harm to coerce a change in one's politics is defined as an act of terror under the USA Patriot Act. But Haaretz, Rented Lips, revealed Canary Mission is a Hasbara defamation outlet, and it's funded by one of the largest Jewish charities in the U.S. It's a very, very organized thing where they just, they'll wreck your life. Believe what we tell you to believe. Love us, hate them, or we'll destroy your life and your career. Been there, done that, didn't buy the T-shirt. All right, we're going to go to the phones here. Rick in Arizona, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, you just said something like that. Israeli ministers said that their planes are stealth to the F-300.
The F-35.
Yeah. Well, he's just saying that to make sure his pilots don't chicken out. That's all.
I would imagine that would be a tremendous concern here, but it's a heck of a risk because, they're not going to risk their F-15s and F-16s because those would be easy targets for the S-300. There is still suspicion that one F-35 that got damaged a while back was in fact hit by an S-200. So there's a couple of risk factors here. If Israel flies some F-35s into Syria and one or more get shot down, first of all, their pilots are going to realize, hey, we're not invisible up here. And two, it will be a disaster for the American defense industry because anybody who is not already committed to buy an F-35 or an F-22 or in fact anything that's stealthy from the United States by contract, they're going to cancel the sales. They're going to go looking someplace else.
Yeah. Kavanaugh, everybody thinks like this guy is going to be some type of a conservative. Let's just remember, if you think he's going to go in there and that's going to give the Catholics and the right to life people, he's going to be their hope. I don't think so. Take a look at what Gorsuch did. He was the guy that was the deciding vote on giving us the biggest sales tax increase in history, and nobody talks about it nowhere. The internet tax. That's who Trump appointed. And I don't even know, is Kavanaugh really a Catholic? Because I don't see him in the Bush administration being a Catholic. There's so much fake news out there. What is the real story here? Is he really a Catholic?
Well, you see, these are the questions. These are the questions that should have been asked during the hearings, but instead, all we got from the Democrats was sexual assault. He drinks, he throws ice at people, but we're past that discussion now. And as I keep telling to everybody who calls on in here to talk about Kavanaugh, I'm not happy with him. Okay, but he's the nominee. He's who Trump nominated, and we've got to get him through that confirmation process. And at this point, I expect that almost everybody in the Senate has made up their mind, and it looks like, barring a surprise of some kind, that he is going to be confirmed.
Yeah. Well, I just think he'll be just like everybody else. He'll vote on the Israeli line, and he'll vote. We'll still have abortion. So the people that want the right to life, you're still going to have abortion in this country 20 years from now, unless you're going to pick up sticks and stones and try to stop it. Thanks for taking my call.
All right. Well, thank you very much here. And again, I'm not a pick up a stick or a stone person. I understand we may hit that point. I'm watching the video of these protests against Kavanaugh that border on riots. People are being arrested. And yeah, it could come to that. I'd hate to see that happen. If you go back and you study the history of the Civil War, virtually everywhere that it was being fought was pretty much destroyed. Cities were burned, farms were wrecked, railroad lines were torn up because the railroads were critical for moving troops and munitions. And so it was always a big deal about gaining control of the rail lines or failing that to destroy them. This nation's already in such bad shape. I don't think a civil war is a good idea right now. But that's just me. Getting on back to Israel, a 15-year-old Palestinian was shot and killed for protesting. Was shot in the head by Israeli forces as he took part in protests near the Erez crossing in northern Gaza. Now, another phone call. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, when you talk about the performance of the Israeli military, I just have to call in. I wanted to mention that the Israeli Air Force, the famed, the legendary Israeli Air Force, which has managed to get absolute air superiority over every refugee camp, in the Middle East. But you know what? They've never gone up against anybody. And the point with the S-300 is that if it indeed is effective against the F-35, and by the way, almost everybody seems to think it really, the F-35 it's a consensus that it's a piece of junk, and
yes.
I'm sure that it will be completely outclassed by this system. But the Israelis not only will no longer have impunity to fly over Syria, but literally the Israelis can take them as soon as they take off from Tel Aviv. The Syrians can take them if they want. They can take them right off the runway in Tel Aviv. As soon as they take off, they're vulnerable. But everybody else in the area, Jordan, everybody who lives with the fear that they've had for the last 50 years that Israel can do whatever they want through the air, that we'll back them up, and that there's no way they can be shot down, which Lebanon has lived with that, Jordan's lived with that, frankly, Syria's lived with that, Egypt's lived with that. They'll no longer have that. And by the way, that will think of the ramifications for American foreign policy if it becomes clear that our weapons are not just simply aren't effective enough to back up our bullying. So there's a lot to this, and the other thing is on that Canary thing, Mike. It's not just students. They're doing it. They are doing the students, no doubt about it. That's a big push. But the Israelis are trying to shut out everybody. I mean, guys like you and me. If they can find out, they'll try to get you some way. They'll try to get you through hack attacks or whatever, or try to get whatever. Doesn't matter who you are. There are ramifications for going up against them, and that's how afraid they are that they have to intimidate people. You're right;
Yes.
it is terrorism.
Yep.
Into doing that.
You're absolutely right. It's psychological terrorism, and I look at America as it is today, and I have to be very honest. When I was a kid growing up, I never, ever thought I would live to see this country in such terrible shape, such partisan bickering in our government, such political divides, such total insanity, like with all this transgenderism and restrooms and all the rest. Back when I was a kid, the world was very stable, if you will, and predictable. Men went to the men's room, women went to the women's room, the dog went outside. And that was kind of comfortable and safe. But I think one of the drawbacks of how chaotic things are right now is I think the American people are feeling very unsettled and unsure about what's going on as well. Anyway, getting on back to Israel and the S-300, time will tell. Putin has created a stalemate with the U.S. and Israel, but it's not going to last. At some point, something is going to happen. And like I said, the most likely outcome that I can see right now is that the U.S. is just going to throw missiles at those S-300 sites until the S-300 sites run out of their missiles, and then they'll destroy the sites. I think that's probably what's most likely going to happen. Anyway, Peter, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And still talking about Israel and Palestine, where the current U.S. government policy is that Palestine is not a state and that the Palestinians should surrender their right of return. And this is how Donald Trump says he's going to solve the Palestinian problem permanently. In other words, they just sort of fade away. And again, this is always in favor of Israel. And I think the world is looking at the United States and realizing how much under Israel's control our government has become. And it's very alarming when you have a powerful military like the United States that is under the control of a foreign power. That can scare a lot of people. Now, do you remember Ahed Tamimi? She was that young lady, slapped a soldier who had hurt her brother. She went to prison for a while. She's out. She's now become the iconic face of the resistance movement in Palestine. So she's up in Spain with her family to participate in various social political events. And there was the Real Madrid, which is a team, and they gave her a T-shirt, and there was a picture taken of it that went in the world media. And Israeli authorities are now calling this Real Madrid team indirect terrorists for giving her a shirt. I guess when they can't really accuse you of committing an act of terror or even thinking about an act of terror, you're now an indirect terrorist. Now, Real Madrid has not issued any official statement about this. It just appears to have been some of the team members just giving her a team shirt. And Israel, I think, overreacted on that one. So we know what's going on in Syria is that Putin has basically blocked the U.S. and Israel. It's a stalemate down there. But the U.S. still wants war because too much of our economy is now dependent on war. You've heard the old saying, war is good for the economy. No, it isn't. It's good for the military economy, but it's bad for everybody else. But the United States is now turning towards Ukraine as the focus for its confrontation with Russia, which is why you're seeing more and more Russia bashing in the media. There's all kinds of stories. Oh, Russian hackers this and Russia did that and Skripal this, and it's just unending. But it does look like the U.S. is switching to Ukraine as the locale to really get World War III going for real. And again, there's no way they're going to be able to keep this from going nuclear. At some point, whichever side feels they're losing and cannot prevail in a conventional war, they will resort to the nuclear weapons. I think it's going to be the United States. I don't think we can pull it off against Russia and China. We're going to take a break for station identification, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Over in the Western Pacific, the U.S. Navy is planning a major show of strength in the South China Sea as a warning to Beijing. Now, so far, the U.S. has been sort of poking gently at China by sending cruisers near the islands in what they call freedom of navigation operations to say, we have the right and the means and the ability to go here, flying nuclear-capable bombers near the islands. There was at one point a near collision between the USS Decatur and the Chinese vessel. So now the United States Pacific Fleet has drawn up a plan for a major show of force. They're going to take a whole bunch of ships and aircraft, and they're just going to go on over and just sail all around those islands. They're going to stay in international waters, but it's clearly a show of force aimed at China, and they're expecting there'll be a strong reaction from Beijing. Gee, you think? I mean, look at it this way. For you people living in California or anywhere in the West Coast, how would you react if Russia or China sent a massive naval and air flotilla to sail around the Channel Islands off the coast of Los Angeles? And they stay in international waters, okay? But they're just going back and forth and back and forth. How would you react? It's clearly a provocation. And it does seem insane when you look at how poorly the United States is already doing in Afghanistan and Syria, certainly, for them to be poking military peers, near equals militarily. It's just insane. As I mentioned on that phone call earlier, India is trying to get a U.S. waiver for its planned purchase of the S-400 air defense missile system. And the United States is warning that India's planned purchase could lead to sanctions by Washington. How dare you buy the Russian weapons? You will buy your weapons from us. Yours are expensive and don't work. That's entirely beside the point. You will buy our weapons or we'll sanction you. All right, we're going to take a phone call now. Jim in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. You know, it seems like the two people I feared the most in the 2016 election was, well, of course, Hillary.
Yes.
And then Jeb Bush. But, you know, you'll be known by your actions. It seems by his actions. Trump is like Jeb Bush. I mean, look, we got, I didn't know, Kay Bailey Hutchinson as ambassador to NATO.
Yes.
Oh, my God. That's just scary. I mean, you got Bolton and Haley. It's total neocons. You know, and I think when Trump ran, he was the Republican version of hope and change. Just like Obama. Obama said some good things in 2008.
Yeah.
But Trump said good things in 2016. But once they get in, it's like they're powerless. And it seems the right, the quote patriot right, the Alex Jones type people, they're like totally asleep. You can do no wrong, you know?
Yeah. No, Trump's a disappointment. There's no two ways about it. And you're right. Back in 2008, Barack Obama was campaigning on ending the wars and bringing our people home. And yeah, they say whatever they think you want to hear to get your vote, and then they get on in and they basically return the favors to their backers and supporters. And Trump has been a tremendous disappointment.
Yeah, I think they really are puppets. I mean, did you know that Trump is giving heavy military hardware to police departments across the country? He bragged about it as a speech. If Obama had done that, his quote, patriot radio would be going nuts. Oh, it's a police state. You know, it's Trump, it's martial law. But since it's Trump, quote, right, and oh, it's fine, you know.
Well, actually, that program to put military-style equipment in the hands of the civilian police has actually been going on for quite a while. I don't even remember where it began. And there was a big fuss when it first started, where the American people just said, this is completely inappropriate weapons to hand to the civilian police. What are you expecting? And after a while, it slowed down, and some of these departments even returned the equipment because it turned out they never really used it. But it is very alarming to see the American police, who are already out of control, to basically be made into a domestic army.
Yeah, I know, and it seemed the alt-right types, they're so confident, well, that, you know, the police state, Trump, wouldn't go after them. Let me tell you, it might not be in Trump's hands. If I was a 9/11 truther or a BDS supporter, I'd be a little concerned, because those guns that Trump and the huge military increase and the police state increase, that can turn right around on you.
Well, I think the reason for giving these kind of weapons and supplies to the civilian police is our government is concerned that there could be a mass uprising, that the American people are reaching their breaking point. And I'm hearing more and more every day and reading more and more every day that people are just angry. They're tired of waiting. I get a lot of emails saying, we know you say be patient and it's going to come apart by itself, but we cannot wait any longer. And obviously this militarization of the police, along with this the attempts to disarm us, to find reasons to take away our Second Amendment rights, basically indicates a government that intends to hang on to power no matter what happens.
Yeah, well, it's very worrisome because when you increase the huge military increase and the police state increase, that can change. And remember, there could be a new president in 2004 who will have her hands on all those goodies and military hardware, and something to be concerned about. But this, I just hear these Trump supporters, blind support for Trump, and that's dangerous. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah,
thanks very much, Mike.
Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Blind support for anybody is dangerous. You're no longer functioning as a citizen. You've become a cult member. And some politicians, they encourage that. Hillary Clinton certainly did. Her support base, they worshipped her. And it didn't matter what she had done or what she was doing. Yeah, we support you. And that always is dangerous. That's the first step toward fanaticism, which we're seeing all over our country now. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. This next story, this came out of antiwar.com. This is very scary. And apparently the Pentagon is using what they're calling the concept of collective self-defense to expand their authority to launch attacks without congressional approval. Now, the idea is, of course, military forces have a right to self-defense if they're attacked. And what the Pentagon is trying to do is say, well, we have the right to attack when anyone the Pentagon identifies as a partner comes under attack. And the Pentagon has affirmed in correspondence with Senator Kaine, this is how they view things. That the Pentagon claims their own authority to launch a military operation if any of their partners are attacked. This is complete dismantling of the safety mechanism for war that was written into the Constitution. Under the Constitution, only Congress can declare a war. The President has limited authority to deploy U.S. military forces for a short interval of time to deal with a crisis. But then we got into this very fuzzy area where Congress basically abrogated its authority over the war power. And they gave Bush that pre-approval, the authorization for the use of force in Iraq, which Bush activated with claims about Saddam's nuclear weapons. And now we're not even going to have that. Now even the president won't be involved in the process. The Pentagon's just going to say, we're going to go and we're going to do this. To me, that sounds like we've entered a period of a military dictatorship, where the nation, especially the war powers, are being led by unelected officials, in this case, officers here. There's another article that came out from Journal Neo, and it's warning about how many American politicians seem ready, willing, and eager, in fact, to go to a nuclear war. And we know that a while back, Paul Craig Roberts came on out and said that a lot of his sources inside Washington, D.C. confirmed there was actual serious talk about a preemptive nuclear attack on Russia. These people are genuinely insane. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike? Mike, I was just thinking when you said about the South China Sea, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're not going to see something like Russia and or China saying, okay, you want to play around in our coast? We're going to play around in your coast. And they show some kind of a show of force either in the East Coast, the West Coast, or maybe even in the Gulf of Mexico. I'm not sure how much the Gulf is actually international waters or not, but I know it is, Pacific or the Atlantic, and you're going to start seeing Russian fleets, or Chinese fleets, and say, okay, you want to play games? We'll play games too. That's all. Tip the cat. Like I said yesterday, these people are out and out insane running our government. They have no concept of reality. That's the problem.
It's.
I know I remember Paul Jacobs saying what you said. He said he did, but he says Washington is full of madmen. No.
Yeah. Yeah. It does seem that way. I wonder if they're all on prescription antidepressants, because I've mentioned many times before, the quality of thinking coming out of Washington, D.C. is not very good.
Yeah, I really do. I really think Prozac. I think a lot of them are Prozac. They got to be. You can't be. I don't know. They can't be that stupid. A lot of them have lived through the Cold War and all that. A lot of them remember the Cold War. They cannot be that stupid that they think that we can survive a nuclear war or we can win a nuclear war. Nobody's going to win something like that. Even if we hit them, Russia first, Russia's already, they've got it into their computers. The minute them missiles start flying, they're going to return.
Yep.
Okay? It's kind of like what happened and unfortunately we're leaving it more and more to computers. Kind of like the Terminator. Terminator, I think, was a great movie, really, because it really did show what could happen and where we're going with artificial intelligence.
Well,
all right, I'll see you. The dog is going crazy on me. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you for the phone call, and give your dog a pet for me. As I've mentioned before, my big concern is that so many of our weapon systems, including the nuclear missiles, are now computerized, and they process at blazing speed. Something could happen before a human could even intervene. Now, when we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, humans were still in control of the process. You had President Kennedy, you had the commanders on the ships, they had their keys. Nothing was going to happen without a human saying, we're going to go for it. But so many of our systems are automated. You could have a malfunction, you could have a software error, and it could all be over. Something really bad could happen before anybody could intervene. I think that's what happened to TWA 800, as just one example. Now, there's another story that came on out. This is from defensenews.com, and it's a cautionary article saying that the United States may not be able to fight two big wars at once. Now, the author of this article is confident that the U.S. military would be able to handle itself adequately in a single major regional conflict while still maintaining small operations around the globe. But its marginal capabilities mean America would struggle if forced to take on a second major conflict at the same time. I think what they're wargaming here, of course, is the U.S. against Russia in Europe and the U.S. against China here in the Pacific. And this is all coming out of the Heritage Foundation's 2019 Index of U.S. Military Strength. Now, the reason this is very interesting is that following World War II, U.S. military doctrine was to be able to fight two major wars on two different continents. And despite the staggering amounts of money poured into the Pentagon, this report says that goal may not have been accomplished. And of course, the other factor is the U.S. has been at war on many parts of the globe over the last 17 years, longer than World War I and World War II put together. The stockpiles are drawn down, the weapons are worn out, the troops are demoralized, the new weapons coming out of the defense plants are junk. In fact, it's entirely possible that America's military has decayed into a hollow shell and that it's all bluff and bluster to sell the weapons and hope that they never actually get used other than for demonstrations and air shows, because you make big money That was the deal on the Cold War in the 50s and 60s. They made up all these weapons and they sold them with the idea they're never really going to get used, so they don't really have to perform the way we said in the sales brochure. Now, another story, this one out of Military Times. There's a 2018 Rand Corporation report on health promotion and disease prevention that has shown up that the military's physical fitness is not very good. And the study featured roughly 18,000 randomly selected participants across each of the service branches and showed that almost 66% of service members, 2/3, are either overweight or obese based on the military's use of body mass index as a measuring standard. Now, that is a cause for concern, especially in the forces that have to work on the ground, like the Army and the Marines. So we're going to go to war against Russia and China with an army that just isn't going to be physically fit enough to go into combat, which may be why we're seeing all those stories yesterday about the revival of the draft. By the way, I was watching the lower third on Fox there, and they're back to bashing China. China has infiltrated Apple and Google and Amazon. Well, that's the downside of the H-1B visas. China may have added a microchip to server motherboards to hack into them. Somebody added the little tiny chip. They're guessing it's China. Pence is out there saying China will not intimidate us. They cannot really seriously be thinking about taking on Russia and China together. We're not going to win that one. Nobody's going to win it. It's going to wind up going nuclear. So, okay, looking at what are they into? Oh yeah, they're talking about that staffer who doxed those members, those GOP senators. All right, we got to take another break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha America, welcome back to the show. And a couple of our listeners sent me this old Newsweek article, and it seems that this giving of military equipment to the civilian police goes all the way back to the 1990s, the early 1990s, and was basically written into the National Defense Authorization Act, where if there was any surplus equipment that the major military forces didn't need immediately, it would be made available to the civilian police departments on their request. So that's where it all began. It didn't start under Donald Trump. All right, let's talk about the economic news here. China has now halted all oil imports from the United States because of the trade war. And Chinese refiners are just staying away. I mean, oil was not included on the list of tariffs, but this is China's way of expressing their displeasure. China currently buys most of its crude oil from Russia and probably is going to start buying a lot more. Article that came on out of Zero Hedge. There's a warning basically coming on out from Jack Ma saying that the U.S. and China are diving into a new Cold War. And you need to remember that when trade stops, sometimes war starts. And we're seeing Trump squeezing China economically through this escalating trade war. At the same time, they're provoking China in the South China Sea with those freedom of navigation exercises, as well as selling arms to Taiwan. It's almost starting to remind me of that that plan that Roosevelt followed to goad Japan into attacking the U.S. So the U.S. could say, oh my goodness, we're the victims, we're going to go get them. And it was this 8-step plan crafted by ONI Lieutenant Commander Arthur H. McCollum. And Roosevelt followed it for the entire year before December 7th, 1941. You were never supposed to know that. You were supposed to think the Japanese just had attacked us for no really good reason at all here. So we're seeing these little picks and probes and provocations. Here's an interesting development. Switzerland has said they will now join a new global interbank payment system independent of the United States. The world is decoupling from the United States. They're decoupling from SWIFT. They're setting up parallel systems. And for Switzerland to say they're ready to bail on the U.S.-centric system, that is significant. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Rob in Western New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'm another caller calling in about Kavanaugh, so sorry about that. But I just want to start off saying that I agree with you. As you know, he's not a perfect candidate, but at this point, I think it's more important that he gets nominated for the sake of truth. Just the fact that he isn't guilty of what he's being accused of. We can't let this precedent be set that people can just make up accusations about people. So, you know, all these nitpicks aside, I think it's just important that we push him through. My question for you, though, is, like, everyone's starting to get confident that he's going to get through, but from my understanding, from what you said, the senator from Alaska is not going to vote for him, and it's still sounding like Flake is considering flaking out. So if the two of them don't vote, doesn't he not get nominated?
He's already nominated. We're talking confirmation, but you're right. It's too close to call. It is really too close to call, and I imagine the phones are ringing and deals are being made and threats are being issued and money is being offered on both sides of this issue, and we're not really going to know until the vote is held. It's not over until the fat lady sings, and it's a terrible way to run a country. But I would like to see Kavanaugh confirmed along the same reason that you just said. We cannot allow this kind of dirty politicking to dominate the political process in the United States of America. And it's not like this hasn't happened before, where candidates will smear each other and hurl the mud back and forth. But we the American people should not, first of all, shouldn't fall for it. We shouldn't listen to it. We should see past it and understand the motives of those who are doing it. So, again, I'd like to see him confirmed. At this point, it is definitely too close to call.
There's 51 Republican senators, right? So they can only really afford one to not vote. And then Pence would have the tiebreaker,
or to vote the other way. Yeah, it could come down to Pence. It could come down to Pence being a tiebreaker.
Because Zero had just running an article that Flake, agrees with the FBI investigation, but he still might not vote for him. He just said that earlier today already. So, I mean, and he's not running for re-election, so he doesn't really seem to.
He may throw. But here's the bottom line: if the Senate vote is a tie, Mike Pence makes the decision. That's his job as president of the Senate. All right, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go and take another break for commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I've just been informed by Mike in the control room. Over at the RBN website, they have a Ben Swan clip about Kavanaugh's stance on the Fourth Amendment. And Mike, if you would go ahead and play that.
Well, the circus that has surrounded the Brett Kavanaugh nomination to the U.S. Supreme Court has been drowned out by 36-year-old uncorroborated accusations of sexual assault. Now, do you support Kavanaugh's nomination? If so, you likely do because you know almost nothing about his record, but you feel for him personally. Do you oppose Kavanaugh? If you do, it's likely for the very same reason. But today, we're going to tell you why, for constitutional reasons, Brett Kavanaugh should likely not be a Supreme Court justice. Is Brett Kavanaugh actually an enemy of the Fourth Amendment? Let's give it a reality check.
Reality Check with Ben Swan, powered by Smart Cash.
Well, all of the noise around the Brett Kavanaugh nomination to the Supreme Court has really accomplished only one thing. It has prevented any real concerns over Kavanaugh's history and view of the Constitution. Today, 3 reasons why Kavanaugh should likely not be on the U.S. Supreme Court. Number 1, the Patriot Act. You may or may not know that during the time of the September 11th terror attacks, Brett Kavanaugh was an associate White House counsel for then President George W. Bush. Now, he was instrumental in helping to draft and create one of the most unconstitutional laws ever passed in this country. We're talking about the Patriot Act. According to the Electronic Privacy Information Center, the Supreme Court Justice nominee in emails at that time referred to the Patriot Act as, quote, measured, careful, responsible, and a constitutional approach. He has been definitively credited with the line, quote, the new law will update laws authorizing government surveillance, which demonstrates one very important thing, that the 4th and 5th Amendment protections of due process and protections against warrantless searches and government surveillance is something that Kavanaugh believes could be updated in the Constitution. As the Foundation for Economic Freedom points out, quote, anyone who knows anything about the Patriot Act knows that constitutional and careful are by no means accurate descriptions. The Patriot Act obliterated the 4th and 5th Amendment rights to privacy and due process by giving the federal government sweeping new powers to conduct surveillance on the American people, end quote. Number 2, his role in the U.S. torture memos and enemy combatants issue. Now, while in the Bush White House, Kavanaugh was involved in 2 very important discussions, the first of which surrounded the use of torture by the administration. In 2004, a series of memos which were originally composed while Kavanaugh served the Bush administration, well, those were released. And in short, these memos told a story of members of the Bush administration attempting to broadly expand the legal definition of torture to justify waterboarding and sleep deprivation as being permissible. Those memos also detailed the Bush administration's attempt to seek the authority to label anyone of their choosing, anyone, as an enemy combatant, thus subjecting them to the possibility of indefinite detention in facilities like Guantanamo Bay. While undergoing his nomination to the Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit in 2006, Kavanaugh testified that he knew nothing about these memos or the attempt to frame a legal argument for indefinite detention, saying this, quote, I think with respect to the legal justifications or the policies relating to the treatment of detainees, I was not aware of any issues on that or the legal memos that subsequently came out. This was not part of my docket, either in the counsel's office or as staff secretary, end quote. But in 2007, the Washington Post reported that in 2002, there was in fact a contentious meeting in the White House over whether the Supreme Court would allow the enemy combatant to be used for any American the government deemed an enemy. And that now Judge Kavanaugh was not only present at this meeting, but was specifically summoned to weigh in on the matter since he himself was a former clerk for the swing vote judge, Justice Anthony Kennedy. At the meeting, he reportedly voiced his concerns that Justice Kennedy and other swing voters on the Supreme Court would never side with the administration's controversial decision to label any person, any American citizen, an enemy combatant. Number 3, Kavanaugh apparently doesn't believe in privacy. Now, no doubt you remember when Edward Snowden, the former NSA contractor, revealed this massive spying program that had been underway by the federal government for years, spying on and gathering information on virtually every American citizen. Well, during that time, Judge Kavanaugh, he was and he still is on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. It's the second most powerful court in the nation. But it was in this position that Kavanaugh sided with government mass surveillance, stating that, quote, the government's metadata collection program is entirely consistent with the 4th Amendment. He also later stated that, quote, critical national security need outweighs the impact on privacy occasioned by this program, end quote. See, Judge Kavanaugh, simply put, believes that you do not have an inherent right to privacy, something that a true constitutionalist would believe in, because privacy and the right to be free from constant surveillance is the very foundation of our Constitution. Judge Andrew Napolitano gave a lecture recently explaining how Kavanaugh holds the 4th Amendment in such low regard. Take a look.
It's essential American right in the 4th, the right to be left alone, which of course today we call privacy. The 4th is the most unique one because it says the people, doesn't say the citizens, it says the people shall not be interfered with in their persons, houses, papers, and effects. Persons, houses, papers, and effects, except by a warrant signed by a judge based on probable cause. Probable cause means probable cause of crime. It doesn't mean probable cause that you're talking to a book agent in Florence, a real case in which the NSA was listening to a conversation in Italian. They thought they were hearing a terrorist. They were just hearing a guy in New York trying to buy a book from the book agent in Florence. When the case came to court, the judge said, well, there's no prosecution here. They didn't come after you for anything you said. Therefore, there's no violation of the Fourth Amendment. Who wrote that opinion? See if you've heard of this guy. About which more later.
So what you need to know is that Judge Brett Kavanaugh's nomination has, again, turned into a circus. Brett Kavanaugh, make no mistake, is not a constitutionalist. The Fourth Amendment to the Constitution is one of the most critically important in order to maintain a free republic. Brett Kavanaugh, throughout his career, has actually worked to destroy the freedoms that the Fourth Amendment protects. And that is the reason Kavanaugh should be resisted. But part of the reason that these issues are not at the forefront of this argument, because the politicians who oppose him and those who support him, virtually all of them, also hold the Fourth Amendment in contempt. They also, all of them, don't believe that you have a right to privacy or freedom from unlawful search or freedom from government spying. See, Brett Kavanaugh's appointment to the U.S. Supreme Court, if it happens, it's not a disregard of women, as the media will tell you. It's a disregard of freedom. That's Reality Check. Let's talk about that right now on social media.
And okay, and Ben Swann has always, laid it out. And we're all aware Kavanaugh is far from perfect. But Ben Swann, I think, did get one aspect of it correct. We're all appalled at how he was being treated by the Democrats. And what's amazing is the Democrats could have come on up and said he doesn't support the Constitution. But then, again, as Ben Swann said, none of them do. I mean, the liberal agenda has been, to take away the Second Amendment. The Israel Firsters want to chip away at the First Amendment. We are losing our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. We have a caller waiting on the line. Cameron in the United Kingdom. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, good afternoon, Michael. Michael, all this is WWE style entertainment. It's not politics, and it's keeping people entertained. It's keeping people hurraying for some baddie one day becomes goodie, and then another goodie one day becomes baddie. Where are we falling for this? And where are we falling? I mean, okay, Kavanaugh was introduced by Trump, nominated by Trump. It doesn't make him sacred. I mean, if he's anti-constitutional, then why should you hold on to him just because Trump introduced him, Trump nominated him? That's one thing. And I need to speak about this SWIFT thing as well with you about this.
Well, before we go to SWIFT here, okay. The issue is the Democrats are desperate to be able to get a liberal Supreme Court judge. We've had a liberal Supreme Court for a long time, and it's handed down some very, very bad decisions, many of which were instrumental in chipping away at our rights and freedoms. And with a liberal Supreme Court judge, we're only going to get more of the same. Now, I don't know about, Kavanaugh. I'm concerned about his attitude toward the Fourth and Fifth Amendment. But Ben Swann missed an important part of his comment about the NSA spying, because that case was only about the metadata. It wasn't about recordings of our phone calls or videos of us going on about our business. It was that cell phone data that was being collected. And so it was a very narrow context. And I think Kavanaugh's thinking was that since the government wasn't actually spying on you, but merely on your hardware, that didn't represent a Fourth Amendment violation. And so we got to be very, very careful that we not get stampeded one way or the other.
Yes, but I mean, these things happen in steps, Michael. They don't happen overnight. I mean, everything happens overnight. They happen step by step. And they start with little things. They start with metadata. And then they sort of progress from there on. I mean, I understand what you're saying. No, I
understand that the surveillance state is encroaching, and I understand we have a government that is openly contemptuous of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Remember when Bush called it a blankety-blank piece of paper? And that's the reality we're having to deal with right now. But I'm still one of those persons who thinks we have to still try and work within the system, even though the system has become hopelessly corrupt. Because the only other alternative is to hit the streets and start a revolution, and I'm just absolutely opposed to that because a lot of...
Well, sorry, Michael, I didn't mean to intrude. Carry on, please.
Go ahead. You wanted to talk about the SWIFT system.
No, I mean, I was just saying that it shouldn't be. I mean, it's not the alternative that people go in the streets. The alternative is that people actually do what Gandhi did, to stop paying taxes, to stop paying bills, to sort of uprise without any violence. As you and I both know, governments are masters of violence. So they can do that without actually getting out in the street, without a shot being fired, to tell the government that we are not happy. I mean, this is what I hope we could have done in UK, which unfortunately people are too docile for that here. But in States, I think people still have a bit of sense probably to say, okay, that's it. We're going to stop complying. We're going to stop paying taxes. We're going to stop paying our bills. Let the economy collapse, and that would be the first step, Michael. I mean,
well, if we had,
I don't know.
Okay, Gandhi had a couple of advantages. First of all, the British protectorate in India did not have a massive corporate media machine that was literally force-feeding the Indian people to say Gandhi is bad, Gandhi is evil, Gandhi inappropriately touched a girl back in high school. The only media there were the newspapers, and only people who wanted to know what was going on would read the newspapers, and most of them were pretty savvy about what was going on. Gandhi reached out to the people of India through their religion. And he did travel around, and he did speak, and he built his reputation over time. And the British just were not prepared to deal with that populist movement. Unfortunately, governments do evolve, and government methods evolve. And I think we're seeing right now, or even we're seeing back in 2016 during the election, and with the turmoil over in Europe, that the real power players have said, we know how to deal with populist movements now. I think this system is going to come apart of itself. I mean, they had a really, really bad day on the stock market today. And all of the experts are saying it's going to start coming apart. And I just hope the United States isn't just going to try and start a war just because they can't think of anything else to do, but it does look like that's what's going to happen.
I hope not. I hope you're right. Michael, the other point is about this SIPs, the Chinese alternative to SWIFT. You see, again, that's one of those things that it runs on the SWIFT backbone. It doesn't have its own backbone, so it is in a way controlled still by the SWIFT. It's like BRICS Bank. The same people on the board of BRICS Bank are the same people on the board of IMF, which is ridiculous. I mean, this is the things that, sort of makes me sit and wonder that maybe we are all being just played, from all sides.
Well,
that's my comment for you.
Okay, well, I was unaware that one of these alternative systems being set up relied on the SWIFT backbone. I mean, that makes no sense at all whatsoever, and I'd like to double check.
I'll send you the link if you want.
I'd like to double check that. I'll
send you the link if you wish, yes.
Yeah, email me a link on that one. Email me a link on that one. But I can't imagine Russia... I can't imagine Russia and China and these other nations setting up their own interbank system. And now Switzerland says they're getting on board with that too. One that doesn't go through the U.S. They're not going to use the U.S. system. The internet is global. It's not going to take that much work and investment to get alternative payment processing systems set up on the global level. Anyway, listen, Cameron, need to let you go. Of
course. Thank you very much, Michael.
All right, and we're going to take a phone call from Catherine in Texas. Aloha, Catherine. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike.
Aloha.
Sending love to you and Claire.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that I agree with the Canadian caller from earlier about how Kavanaugh, it's just a big show and farce. And also Cameron in the UK just now saying how this is just a big show and it doesn't get down to the real issue of, his Fourth Amendment and Patriot Act and all of that. And it feels like a distraction that they put the, sex scandal issues. So maybe they didn't have to deal with the real issues.
That comes right out of the Clinton camp. It was called the politics of personal destruction. And that is because most politicians think voters are going to vote with their emotions rather than their intellect. And unfortunately, sadly, they are often correct. Anyway, Catherine, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of the program today, and looking at the corporate media, they're still going on and on about the Kavanaugh confirmation, the FBI report, and yes, it is a show, and it was a circus. And I was saying earlier in the week, in fact, last week, the part that really worries me is that the corporate media is not covering other things, like what's going on with the investigation into the FBI and Department of Justice regarding the collusion investigation, and more importantly, all of these military provocations taking place around the globe. Much of that is being carried in the foreign media. We're having to go to the foreign media to find out about these things. And it does feel like, along with this fight back and forth over these sex allegations, that we are being conditized, because that's what happened back then when they were getting ready to do the run-up to 9/11. Other countries knew the U.S. was getting ready to invade Afghanistan. It was not being reported to the American people by the corporate media. We were getting Gary Condit, Chandra Levy. Oh, they had a tawdry sex affair, and then she disappeared. Ooh, did he kill her? And it just went on and on and on and on. So that when 9/11 happened, it hit the nation with an overwhelming psychic shock. And we just went along with the invasion of Afghanistan. And then we were told that it was actually Iraq. And we went along with the invasion of Iraq. And we can see how desperate the U.S. government is for a war. Because without one, things are falling apart. They need a war to galvanize the nation, they hope. They think it's going to revive the economy. I don't think so. But they've just gone too far down this agenda to turn back without collapsing the economy completely. Anyway, speaking about the economy here, we were talking the other day about Verizon and how they've offshored their IT work to a company in India, and they're letting workers go. But apparently, Verizon has now extended offers to 44,000 workers to take a lucrative severance package to leave the company. So it's another sign that the U.S. economy is locking up. And finally, everyone's talking about the Chinese economy. Is it good or bad? There's a big difference between China and America, and it has to do with debt. The average U.S. household debt is 136% of household income. For the Chinese, it's 17%. They do not like to borrow money. They like to pay as they go, which would be a very wise thing for Americans to be doing. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller, and I'm sure he's got lots to tell you. Please take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know, email, face-to-face, SneakerNet. The social media is just getting more and more restrictive every single day. So please donate to Republic Broadcasting. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.